Good morning. Coming up today, how stepping into the boxing ring can help the 1 million people in the U.S. living with Parkinson's disease. Who is most affected and why? Plus the latest on research and treatment for this debilitating disease. The Morning Medical Update starts right now. Welcome in today. It is Thursday, April 14th. Thank you so much for joining us here on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter. Coming up in about 25 minutes, a salad is supposed to keep you healthy, right? Well, then why are so many people getting sick? We're going to tell you why. And then at 8:15, Dr. Hawkinson is going to join us with the latest COVID-19 numbers from right here at the health system. But first, 10 million people are living with Parkinson's worldwide, and that number will grow in the next decade. A look at the treatments currently available, trials that are currently underway, and the movements that help patients. So get your questions sent into us on YouTube, Facebook, and the Medical News Network. You can find links to those right there on your screen. Approximately 60,000 Americans are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease each and every year. That is according to the Parkinson's Foundation. Right now, there is no cure for Parkinson's, but there are treatments for the symptoms. One of those includes boxing. Reporter Lisa Benson takes a look at one program here locally, and she filmed this before the pandemic began.
When it comes to Parkinson's disease and boxing, many people think about the late, great Muhammad Ali, not trainer Tara Patterson.
Back, front, back.
Patterson uses boxing to help people with Parkinson's live better lives.
Bend and lift. If you're dealt this hand in life, you have one of two choices. You can give in and give up, or you can come here and you can fight back.
This gym is full of fighters.
Once I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I had resigned myself to the fact I wasn't going to let it get the best of me.
People come in and, with balance issues, using a walker or some other device, and it's the fact that they can become more independent.
The all-volunteer team at the Freudenthal Center in St. Joseph, Missouri, has the full support of doctors at the University of Kansas Health System.
Parkinson's disease is a disorder where there are certain brain cells that are dying. And because there are brain cells that are dying, there are different chemicals that are involved in the brain that are getting less. The most common is dopamine.
Less dopamine means tremors, stiffness, and walking difficulties. The reduction of other chemicals in the brain leads to memory loss and depression.
I tell my patients that the first 10 years, the medications and all will do very well. The second 10 years depends a lot on how well they take care of themselves.
Proper PD care includes diet modifications and exercise. Dr. Pawa says boxing helps.
They're on their feet doing stuff, so it strengthens the muscles in their legs. The strengthening of the muscles in their legs, they're also going to have better balance.
Buddy, head.
There is no known cure for Parkinson's, but doctors at the University of Kansas Health System can help control symptoms if patients are willing to do the work.
You can work to handle this disease more on your own participation versus just relying on medications to do the job.
I think of these bags, especially here in boxing, as being the Parkinson's disease. And when I hit the bag, I'm trying to hurt it. I want to beat it.
We like that attitude. Hurt it and beat it. Joining me now to talk more about this is Dr. Rajesh Pawa, who heads up the Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Program here at the University of Kansas Health System. Good morning to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So glad you are here. It is Parkinson's Awareness Month, and so we want to talk all about this. And just first explain to people what Parkinson's disease is. What is it doing to someone's body?
Yes. Parkinson's disease is a disorder of the brain. What happens is there are cells in the brain that are dying, and this leads to reduced chemicals in the brain. Because of that, patients have different symptoms that begin. The most common one that is pretty obvious is tremor, but along with tremor, patients have slowness, stiffness, walking difficulties, and these are what we call the motor symptoms. Patients also have what we call non-motor symptoms, which may include anxiety, depression, constipation, memory disorders. So all those together make up the syndrome of Parkinson's disease.
So what might someone notice in those first initial signs, doctor, that might say, I need to get to my doctor and start asking some questions?
Yeah, so one of the most common reason patients come to us is because they have tremor. And this tremor usually starts on one side. Other than the tremor, the patient may have some walking difficulty, maybe dragging one foot. They may have a change in their handwriting getting slower. They may have difficulty using the hand or the arm that is initially affected. Some patients may have actually shoulder pain, which you may not even think that may be Parkinson's, but a closer look may show that they have some tremor and some stiffness and slowness on the side with the shoulder pain.
So let's talk about movement. We just saw those folks boxing. Why boxing? Why does that specific movement help, and why is that so beneficial?
So first of all, any activity is good. So that's the most important thing we need to make sure people understand. What happens is Parkinson's usually affects older people, and people are often retired, they're not as active, and we know patients who are more active at time 1 year do much better 15, 20, 25 years down the road. Any kind of exercise is good. Boxing has become one of the main things that is being done because of many reasons. One is that patients who go there have Parkinson's, so it is not like they're going to a support group, they're going to an exercise group. They can still socialize, they can still talk about their disease with other people. They're having these movements, and these movements keep them more functioning. Speech is affected in Parkinson's, so when they're boxing, they're yelling and screaming, and that helps with their speech. It helps with their balance. So boxing is one thing which helps not only with strengthening, but also helps with the balance and speech. One thing we need to make sure people understand, when we talk about Rocksteady boxing program, it does not just involve boxing. It involves a whole bunch of exercises, which includes balance, speech, and other exercises too.
Well, mind, body, and soul. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's hard to find any doctor who comes on the show that doesn't say the support of others around you and that camaraderie. That has got to be part of the treatment, and just seeing people moving, interacting, smiling, it's all part of it, right?
That's right. I mean, it is extremely important that people talk to one another. They don't withdraw from it. And the thing is that when they go there, women are more likely to go and be part of support groups and talk to other people with Parkinson's. Men are much more hesitant in going to support groups. Going to something like an exercise program, they actually have that thing that they can do without saying they're going to a support group.
Well, and boxing, how powerful is that? I love seeing those guys in there saying that they're going to hurt it and they're going to beat it. So you brought up men and women. So how does it affect men and women differently? Who's more likely to be affected by this?
So men are slightly more likely to be affected. We talk about 60% of the Parkinson's is in men, 40% is women. And because of that also, there are more caregivers who are women. We often talk about our patients, but we forget the caregivers are also equally important. And we often say, often we talk to the patient, how are you doing? We should also ask the caregiver, how are you doing, taking care of the person.
I want to bring up a map that we found that I thought really kind of helped us understand where do we sit on the Parkinson's map. This was provided by the Parkinson's Foundation. You can see as many as 20,000 to 32,000 people in Kansas and Missouri have Parkinson's. By 2030, those numbers nationwide are expected to hit 1.2 million. How concerning, and what else can we learn from that map? What does that tell us? Is that population based?
So yes, it is population-based. It is age-based. The older the population, much more likely you're going to see Parkinson's disease. And what we are seeing is an aging population.
Right.
And that also brings up, we are going to see more and more Parkinson's patients over the time. It's a very expensive disease to the public health because often once patients develop Parkinson's, they have to quit working. Over time, they may need more help. Often they end up in nursing homes. So it is a very expensive disease. After Alzheimer's, this is the second most common neurodegenerative disorder for neurological diseases.
But you make a good point. People are living longer. That's good news. But bad news is now we have more Parkinson's cases, correct?
That's correct.
That's the correlation. How common is it, though, in younger people?
Well, younger people can get Parkinson's, so it is not that it's exclusively a disease of the elderly. We talk about 10% of our patients are younger than 50 years of age. So, younger patients have different needs. They're still working, they have young kids, just trying to keep the work going, trying to often hide it from their employers can be very challenging from them. And the other thing is when these people go talk to their people at work, it's very difficult for some people to understand that such a young person can have Parkinson's disease. And it really is also a big issue that we often don't pay enough attention to.
I want to get to some community questions because they're already coming in this morning. And Sarah wants to know, and you talked about this, doctor, off the top of the show, but what causes Parkinson's? Is this hereditary?
Right. So we right now are not sure what causes Parkinson's disease in a particular person. So when I have a patient that comes in, we try to assess certain risk factors. Do they have a family history of Parkinson's? We test our patients using genetic tests and looking at the 7 most common genes, and we find about 10 to 15% of our patients in the clinic have one of these common genes. Does not mean that patients who are negative, it is not genetic in them. It is possibly we have not yet discovered all the genes that can indeed cause Parkinson's disease. The other thing we know, there are certain chemicals, especially pesticides, herbicides, certain industrial chemicals, all of them also increase the risk of Parkinson's disease. So that's another factor we look at. Have they been exposed to chemicals? Because that can also cause Parkinson's. We feel that it's really the interaction between genes and chemicals that results in Parkinson's disease. So again, like I said, in a particular individual, it may be difficult to say, but in general, it is still genetic and environmental factors.
Isaac wants to know, how is Parkinson's distinguished from Alzheimer's disease or dementia?
So Parkinson's disease, like I mentioned earlier, has more motor symptoms. You have tremor, you have slowness, you have gait difficulties. If patients do develop cognitive issues or memory issues, it occurs later in the disease course, 5 years, 10 years down the road. With Alzheimer's disease, it's the memory that is involved. So initially, the patient may become more forgetful, may have confusion. They often don't have any physical symptoms. They don't have any tremor. They don't have any slowness initially. There is a disorder called Lewy body dementia, where often the symptoms of both Parkinson's and memory disorder begin together. So it's a combination where we call Lewy body dementia, where they have motor and memory issues begin together.
So we'll take some more questions here in just a moment. I want to talk about some treatments and some trials that people can participate in just a moment. But I do want to turn over now to Dr. Dana Hawkinson. He's our Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control with our COVID count. Good morning to you.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
Good. Right now in the health system, we have 5 active infections, 1 in the ICU, still 1 on the ventilator, 30 in that recovery period, a total of 35, but again, we are seeing those active infections. So these are patients that we are testing because they have complained of symptoms or we suspect COVID-19 disease process, but it still remains, again, in the single digits. That's good. We know we have seen overall in the United States, and it looks like in Kansas and Missouri, there is a little bit of uptick in cases, but we have to understand that if we are seeing hospitalizations, we probably won't see those for another 1 to 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. Hopefully there won't be that increase in hospitalization, and we'll just kind of see what the overall case surge does, if there actually tends to be one.
I have a couple questions for you this morning. True or not, even mild COVID-19 cases can raise the risk of blood clots?
Yeah, absolutely. We know any COVID can raise the risk of blood clots, both large blood clots and small blood clots. You know, early in the pandemic, we heard of really healthy people who had a bout of COVID, and then maybe 1 to 2 weeks later, he would wake up and they couldn't breathe, or they would not really be able to feel their legs. That was because of those blood clots. So yes, any distribution of that COVID disease, whether it's mild or severe, could lead to blood clots.
And I want to ask you about the mask mandates being extended on planes, trains, not automobiles, but extended for another 2 weeks. You think that's the right call?
I do. I mean, I think you are just with so many people. We know the airlines have talked about their airflow in the planes themselves, but we also know when you're in those airports, you are just around so many people. Some places may have better ventilation than others. Overall, I think that is a good thing to do, is continue those mask mandates for those public transportation areas.
All right, we'll get back with you in just a few moments. Let's get back with Dr. Pawa. He is the head of the Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Program here at the University of Kansas Health System. So glad you are with us. We are talking about Parkinson's disease. How has COVID impacted those dealing with Parkinson's? What has been the COVID factor?
So what happened is when COVID started about 2 years ago, there was a lockdown. Patients who were active, who are socializing, basically went into a lockdown. And what we found is Parkinson's patients getting worse, not only physically, but also mentally. And at that time, we couldn't even refer them for physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, because again, there was COVID all over and they had to stay home. So we definitely noticed that regression that occurred in our patients over the last year. The good part is over the last year, they have started getting back, they have started doing their exercises, they have started getting more active, and things are improving, but definitely it impacted both physical and emotional health of our patients.
Do you think people getting tested for Parkinson's were held off? Did that delay any with people putting off getting checked out? Did
Yes,
you see any of that?
definitely.
Yeah.
We were not seeing as many patients because patients didn't want to come out and visit us. Even those who were doing telemedicine, often they were not being referred as much. I think people were just afraid of COVID, that they were overlooking some of their other symptoms that they had, and it definitely delayed the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease.
Well, let's talk about any breakthroughs that might be on the horizons and treatments. We're going to talk about trials in just a moment, but what is your hope for the future? What do you see in your lifetime of advancements?
Right. So, we have been fighting hard to find a cure for Parkinson's. That is our ultimate goal. Short of that is if we can even find something that would slow Parkinson's disease. And it's not from lack of trying. I mean, we have done close to 100 different drugs which have been tested for Parkinson's over the last 30 years. It's just that we have not found anything that could slow the progression down. Right now, most of the studies looking at slowing the disease progression is looking at abnormal proteins in the brain cells. And we feel that if we can clear these cells of this abnormal protein, maybe we can slow Parkinson's, maybe we can even cure Parkinson's. So that's one big push going on, is different medications that are looking to reduce the protein in the brain, and maybe that may actually help with Parkinson's symptoms. The other big thing is we are still looking at improving symptoms and quality of life in our patients. Even though we have had drugs for the past 50 years, we do end up having issues in our patients, what we call motor fluctuations and dyskinesias. That is time when the medications work and time when the medications don't work, or times when they have the involuntary movements during the day. In the next year or so, we are going to have pumps, levodopa pumps that would be like diabetic pumps that would deliver the drug continuously under the skin and hopefully have the patient have less of a roller coaster during the day than some of the patients that are undergoing that right now.
As far as drugs and treatment, recently science engineered a bacteria to help produce a drug that could help treat Parkinson's. What can you tell us about that?
So it's a very exciting discovery, but it's also very early in the disease phase. We are looking at using bacteria to produce levodopa in the gut. And the good part about it is that it releases the levodopa more continuously rather than taking pills, which we take them and they get into our body and brain over short periods of time. Physiologically, we believe that when we produce dopamine in the brain, it is produced continuously, not like tablets that every few hours we have a sudden rush of dopamine. So that would be a great thing if we can actually have a bacteria in the gut that can continuously produce this drug. Of course, like I said, this is very early. The initial studies have only been in mice, but hopefully someday that may actually become a reality.
All right, and tell us about the Llama Factor. And yes, I said llamas. Explain, please.
Right. So like I mentioned earlier, one of the things we talked about is clearing this abnormal clumps of protein in the brain. And one of the ways you do it is having antibodies against these abnormal proteins. So some have used llamas to produce these antibodies, and using those antibodies someday may also be a potential treatment for Parkinson's.
All right, we're going to take a few, well, let's check and see if we have reporter questions on the line, and then we'll go to some more community questions. Okay. All right, so let's go to these. Curious, Isaac wants to know, with tremors being a common symptom, is anyone with Parkinson's able to drive?
Right. So just because someone has Parkinson's does not mean that they have to give up all the things they enjoy or things they do on a day-to-day basis. It really depends on what stage of Parkinson's they are. One of the best ways we say to find out is that, is your loved one comfortable sitting with you in the car when you're driving? If your loved one feels uncomfortable, it is time to get an evaluation whether you are safe to drive or not. We do have driving simulators available where patient can go sit in a lab, drive on the screen, and see how safe they are. We may get an answer, yes, you're safe to drive, no, you're not safe to drive, or we need to actually take you out on the road and drive with you and see how safe you're driving or not. But just because you have Parkinson's disease does not mean you cannot drive, you cannot fly for that matter. You can do everything you would like to do.
Okay, Ashley wants to know, are there any precursor disorders or syndromes that have been linked to Parkinson's, and so that we could do something to prevent it personally?
That's a very good question. And right now, there's a lot of research going on trying to catch patients with Parkinson's before they even have the tremor, the slowness, the stiffness. In fact, the Michael J. Foundation has a large study going on, which we are part of, looking at patients without any motor symptoms and trying to assess with certain tests if they indeed may have early Parkinson's disease. So what happens is patients who are at risk. So who is at risk? Patients who have a family history of Parkinson's, patients who have REM sleep disorder. What is REM sleep disorder? We all dream at night. Normally we are paralyzed when we are dreaming. Parkinson's patients actually act out their dream. So if they're dreaming they're running, they'll actually start running. If they dream that they are fighting someone, they'll actually fight. And that's what we call REM sleep disorder. So REM sleep disorder is a huge precursor for motor symptoms of Parkinson's. So anyone who has REM sleep disorder without any motor signs can be part of this study. We do different tests such as a DAT scan, which would show if there's any dopaminergic dysfunction in the brain. We do skin biopsies, we do spinal fluid testing, and we are looking at any biomarker that can tell us earlier on if this indeed is Parkinson's or not. And even if they don't have any symptoms, then we follow them very closely every year to see when the symptoms develop and when these biomarkers actually change. Similarly, family history. If someone has a family history of Parkinson's, they can also be part of this study. They often start by doing smell tests because, again, loss of smell is a precursor for Parkinson's disease. And if there is loss of smell, then we go ahead and do other tests on that. But that's a wonderful question. I think that's where someday we'll be before the motor symptoms.
Let's take this question from Shirley. She's asking if you can comment on cortical basal degeneration.
So when we talk about Parkinson's, we are talking about anyone who has tremor, slowness, stiffness. 80% of the patients who have these symptoms have Parkinson's disease. So Parkinsonism is a syndrome where you have tremor, slowness, stiffness. Parkinson's disease is one disorder that causes Parkinsonism. Similarly, corticobasal degeneration, multiple system atrophy, progressive supranuclear palsy, etc., are other syndromes that look like Parkinson's, that have symptoms of Parkinson's, but are not indeed Parkinson's disease. The thing with corticobasal degeneration is often the symptoms begin on one side, like Parkinson's disease, but they progress much faster. They often have dystonia, where the patient has stiffness and turning of their hand. Instead of tremors, they often have myoclonus. And the unfortunate part about these other Parkinsonian syndromes is they do not respond to the normal Parkinson's disease medications. So at this stage, we basically provide them with care that keeps them functioning than trying to help their symptoms or trying to slow the disease.
Any food or diet changes somebody could make?
So, the food part is really an interesting question, because for years we have not talked about food as a thing that can make a difference. But we are really looking more and more at the diet, and we feel that the Mediterranean diet is more like a brain diet. Having a lot of fish, a lot of fruits, nuts is really helpful for brain in general, but may also be helpful for Parkinson's disease itself. So I would suggest that is the diet today, which you would say may help.
A good diet can never hurt anything, right?
That's correct.
It can only help. So talk about the progression. Does everybody, is it a fast progression, slow progression? And what makes people progress at different paces?
Right. So Parkinson's disease, unfortunately, is a progressive disorder. What we look at it is that if someone starts at 60 years of age, you're looking at 20, 25 years of progression. If you have someone 40 years of age, they may have 35, 40, 45 years of progression. And if someone has it at 85, they may only have 5 or 10 years of progression. So, of course, age is an important factor. Because if you look at it, the average age we are looking is right now in the late 70s. So you're already looking at someone 85 having Parkinson's. They have already beaten the average age that we can live for today. The other thing is men. Usually men progress faster than women. Patients who don't have tremor. Usually tremor actually helps because patients who have tremor actually don't progress as fast as patients do not have tremor. But the biggest change that happens is patients who start having memory issues often progress faster. So tremor is good, no tremor is not as good. Generally starting on one side is good, starting on both sides with walking difficulty may not be good. Older the person is, the faster it'll progress. The younger the patient, the slower it'll progress.
Carol wants to know, are there any personality changes?
So what happens with Parkinson's disease? First of all, it is very common for Parkinson's patients to have depression and anxiety. Again, depression and anxiety could actually be a premotor symptom, that before the motor symptoms develop, they have depression and anxiety. What happens with disease progression is patients can start having memory issues. And the other thing that can happen is they can start having sometimes hallucinations, paranoia, and some of this can actually lead to agitation. So it's very important to keep track of the patient. We definitely like caregivers to come in because unless a caregiver comes in, we do not know if a patient is seeing things at home, if the patient is getting paranoid, because later on in the disease course, some of these symptoms can be more challenging than actually the tremor, the walking, and slowness.
So we're going to wrap up here, but I don't want to do that before we talk about trials. Dr. Pawa, my grandmother had severe Parkinson's, and I was very young when she was going through this, and sadly it's one of the real memories I have of her was her severe tremors and shaking. That's just kind of the first thing that sadly that pops into my head when I think of my grandmother. And I so hope she could have been around to be part of the solution to help find a cure. So these trials, I think, are sometimes a way for people to feel like this is what they could do. They could be a part of the solution. So tell people about the trials. And then when you're done with that, I'm going to tell people where they can go to find out if they might be able to participate.
Thank you. So we are one of the largest clinical trials for Parkinson's disease in this country. We have trials at different stages. I talked about the PPMI study, which is not actually a drug study, but again, patients very early in the disease course or patients who don't even have motor symptoms can be part of this study. We are looking at drugs to slow disease progression. We are looking at medications to use in early disease, which may have better improvement in the motor symptoms with fewer side effects. We are looking at medications for patients who are having what I said on and off. Times when the medications work, times when the medications don't work during the day. We are testing medications for dyskinesias. Those are involuntary dancing movements that often patients can have. We are testing medications for tremors in Parkinson's. And finally, we are also testing medications for cognitive issues in Parkinson's. So through the whole range of the disease, we are looking at different medications because, like I said, not only is our goal to slow and cure Parkinson's, but also improve the symptoms that with the current medications we cannot improve.
All right, so I was just sending a message to our social media staff. So we're going to put this in the feed, kumc.edu/Parkinson's, or they can go to pdetcenter@kumc.edu, correct?
Right, or they can even email at pdetcenter@kumc.edu.
They could ask questions, and you'll give them all the information they need and find out if they could possibly be able to participate.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for that. We're going to get to our final thoughts, and I'm going to let you get us started.
So, Parkinson's disease, like I said, is a progressive disease. Just because someone has Parkinson's does not mean that they cannot do stuff. They can still do everything, and that's the important part. What the person does at year 1 of diagnosis is going to mean what they're going to be year 20, 25 years down the road. Because when a person develops Parkinson's, they have such few symptoms that they often feel like, I'm fine, I don't need to do anything. But that's the time when they really have to work hard, stay active, not only physically, but mentally, and mentally being doing brain exercises, especially if they're not working, socializing, doing new things to keep that mind going. And the other important part is make sure you take your medications on time and participate in clinical trials. A lot of these trials are before where we are trying to slow the progression before they start any other drugs. Once they start symptomatic drugs, some of the disease-slowing drugs we cannot test in these patients.
So there is some hope. And you are going to be back next Wednesday with Dr. Stites, right, to talk about a treatment for tremors, correct?
That's correct.
Well,
thank you for having me again.
Well, all right. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much, Doctor.
Thank you.
And Dr. Hawkinson, final thoughts from you today.
Yeah, overall, as far as COVID goes, things are better. We have seen a slight increase in the nation, especially in the Northeast, of cases. How will that translate to hospitalizations? Hopefully it will not be the same as it was with the Delta Omicron surge, but just understand the virus is still circulating out there. I have 2 friends who have it right now. They are younger, they are boosted, but they are having significant symptoms with pain, fevers, shortness of breath. So it's important to continue to understand the risks when you go out into any particular area. And if you feel unsafe, either don't do it, or you can always wear a mask, distance. Again, doing those things outdoors is going to be much safer, and also being up to date with your vaccination.
All right, I'm not quite done with you yet this morning.
Oh, okay.
Because you're going to be my raw chicken expert today.
Yeah.
So in medical headlines today, so a new study has found that too many people are actually doing one thing before adding chicken to their salads. They're not cooking it properly. So Doc Hawk, I know people are turning to chicken now because we know that gas prices are up and meat prices are up. So people are trying to eat and feed their family on the cheap, and maybe they're doing it a little too quickly. So just remind us about that and what it could cause inside the body if you do get that bacteria.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand, as Dr. Stites always says, the rules of infection prevention go with you wherever you are. Hand hygiene is one of those important rules, but also we can extrapolate that to the kitchen and food preparation. Always make sure to do good hand hygiene. Make sure to clean off those surfaces. When you are preparing, make sure you are cooking any of those meats, whether it's chicken, pork, fish, beef. Cook those to those good temperatures to kill that bacteria. We know that there is bacteria on those food substances. We know that there are outbreaks all the time that we hear about in different food products. So it's important to understand that risk, continue to use those good infection prevention practices, good hand hygiene, cleaning off those surfaces, cooking well, and making sure to do that will help reduce your risk of getting any of those infections. Especially with chicken, we know salmonella is a big infection. That is a gastrointestinal infection. We know recently there was a recall on salads as well with listeria, another gastrointestinal infection, which can also cause severe disease in people who are pregnant, older people, and those who are immune compromised. So it's always important to understand the food product that you're getting. Are there any recalls? And again, during food preparation, make sure you're using adequate hand hygiene, cleaning the surfaces in that kitchen on a regular basis, and of course cooking all your meats to that desired temperature.
All right, I knew you were the guy to ask. I just cook my chicken till it's like a shoe. It's just so dry. You just put something on top
safe
of it.
That way, that's right.
Right, nice and safe that way.
If you add enough barbecue sauce, it'll be fine.
Hey, you can put on anything. Right. All right, thanks for that. Good reminder. Okay, all new this morning. We have been talking about this really for the last couple of years, and in the last weeks, we've really been ramping it up here. Hundreds of people got their chance to check out the new Proton Center here at the University of Kansas Health System. President and CEO of the health system, Bob Page, along with Royals great George Brett, they both talked with the crowd before everyone got a chance to check out this leading edge technology that we've been showing you. It's going to help bring the very best in cancer care to those around the region. The center, by the way, will start seeing patients May 23rd. All right, coming up at 10 o'clock on All Things Heart, a Kansas City woman suffered seizures for a decade. And it wasn't until she came here to the University of Kansas Health System that she finally got the help she needed. Here's just part of her story, which you will see coming up on All Things Heart.
Before the surgery that gave Jennifer Krause her life back, before she made it her mission to share her health journey with as many people as possible, for almost 20 years, Jen lived a unique kind of torture that she sometimes endured up to 40 times a day.
So it was like an aura, like a deja vu moment. Like you'd been somewhere before, you'd seen something before, and you just kind of go dizzy. And just everything kind of just stands still and kind of, it's just odd. And then I would get this warm sensation over the whole left side of my body. And afterwards I'd get super tired, just exhausted. And then I would just sleep for hours.
Then the episodes got dangerous.
I was walking into a local store, walked in, fell face first on the concrete, and went into my first grand mal seizure.
It happened again when she was driving her 12-year-old son, who somehow had enough composure to turn off the car and slowly steer them into a ditch where he helped call 911.
And then from there, I saw probably, I think there was like 12 different neurologists. They never could find anything.
Jen's world got incredibly small and isolating. She was no longer allowed to drive or do many of the other things we tend to take for granted. Using a knife in the kitchen, cooking over a stove, walking up the stairs, riding an escalator, showering unsupervised, because having an episode while doing those things could be deadly. To make it worse, Jen says every single one of the almost dozen doctors she saw told her there was nothing wrong with her except possibly anxiety. Until finally she came to the University of Kansas Health System, where she met Dr. Carol Ulloa.
I wasn't surprised because it's actually relatively common that people have MRIs done in the community and are told that their MRIs are normal.
After 20 years of being misdiagnosed and misunderstood, Dr. Ulloa told Jen she had epilepsy.
It was really quite a shame because she'd been having seizures for over 2 decades. And so the sooner you can pinpoint something like that and the sooner you can find it, then the quicker the treatment and being able to stop the seizures.
Stopping those seizures was Dr. Ulloa's top priority. Not only was Jen in danger every time she had one, but there was another risk, one that doctors say was rare for Jen, but is always possible with patients who have uncontrolled generalized seizures, what Jen called her grand mal seizures. It's called SUDEP, sudden unexplained death in epilepsy.
And we are going to learn all about it. And we're going to find out how Jen is doing today. We're going to talk with her and the doctor who helped finally properly diagnose her. That is coming up on All Things Heart starting at 10 a.m. Don't forget, Mother's Day is just about a month away. So if you don't have a gift yet, we want your ideas. We want to know what you want. Here's a QR code on your screen right now where you can send us your ideas, your favorite gift, or what you're hoping for. You can also email us at the Medical News Network at kumc.edu. There's the address on your screen. Everyone, thank you so much for being with us today to talk about this important topic. Don't forget, you can catch our shows anytime on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. Have a fantastic Thursday. Coming up tomorrow on the Morning Medical Update. One state in the metro no longer considers COVID a pandemic. Instead, they're now calling it an endemic. Living with COVID and what our wastewater is telling us now about viral variants after the big spring break vacations. Check out these social media channels at 8 a.m.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.